Dominoes are great, aren't they? There's so many things you can do with them. There's playing dominoes and all sorts. Anyway, I've fashioned these dominoes into the shape of a map of the world because there's a new report out this week looking at the environmental effects of climate change and overuse of resources around the world. The suggestion is that the activities that drive our modern way of life are having an effect on the biosphere that's a bit like this. Yeah, we'd already caused multiple domino effects to kick in about 3 decades ago. We're well past that stage now. Now what we're doing to our environment is less like a domino effect and more like smashing it to pieces. So the title of this report is quite apposite. This is a crisis. Welcome to Just Have a Think. So this report then, well, it's been produced by the Institute of Public Policy Research here in the UK. They are a registered charity and the UK's preeminent progressive think tank. One of their key roles is to promote research in technological, economic, social and political sciences. Their aim is to educate the public in these areas and to advance the causes of environmental protection and sustainable development. They're 100% transparent about who produces their research. At their website IPPR.org you can find the profiles of every single member of their team with email addresses and contact details for each of them. And it's the same with their funding. At each funding level you can see exactly who's supporting the organisation. So I think it's fair to say that their integrity rating is pretty robust, and for a relatively mainstream report like this, it certainly doesn't pull any punches. Here's the first paragraph of their summary. Mainstream political and policy debates have failed to recognise that human impacts on the environment have reached a critical stage, potentially eroding the conditions upon which socio-economic stability is possible. Human-induced environmental change is occurring at an unprecedented scale and pace, and the window of opportunity to avoid catastrophic outcomes in societies around the world is rapidly closing. These outcomes include economic instability, large-scale involuntary migration, conflict, famine, and the potential collapse of social and economic systems. The historical disregard of environmental considerations in most areas of policy has been a catastrophic mistake. The IPPR are undertaking a programme of work in 2019 to better understand and develop some solutions to these problems. And here at Just Have a Think, we'll be keeping a close eye on their progress. In the meantime, here's some stats that they provide for us on page 1 of this preliminary report. The 20 warmest years since records began in 1850 have been in the past 22 years, with the past 4 years the warmest ever recorded. Vertebrate populations have fallen by an average of 60% since the 1970s. More than 75% of the Earth's land is substantially degraded. Since the mid-20th century, 30% of the world's arable land has become unproductive due to erosion. The report goes on to talk about a domain of risks such as the collapse of social and economic systems at local and even at global levels. Like many other commentators in recent times, the IPPR suggests that it's doubtful that societies around the world are adequately prepared to manage this risk, and that it represents the greatest challenge that humans have faced in their history. And as we've already discovered in a couple of previous videos, the consequences of environmental breakdown will fall hardest on the poorest, who are the most vulnerable to its effects and the least responsible for the problem. The statistics show that the poorest 50% of the global population are responsible for around 10% of yearly global greenhouse gas emissions, and as this chart demonstrates, the richest 10% of the global population contributes 50% of these emissions. And I'm going to chuck in one more statistic for good measure, this one released recently by Oxfam. In 2018, the wealth of the world's billionaires increased by $2.5 billion every day. At the same time, the wealth of the poorest 50% of humans on the planet, which is 3.8 billion people, decreased by $500 million every day. Anyway, to put the timeline of human existence into a bit of context, the IPPR report reminds us of the remarkable period of climate stability that our species has lived through. Their commentary points out, over the last 11,700 years, global environmental conditions have remained remarkably stable, with little temperature variability and a warmer climate relative to the preceding ice ages. This epoch is identified as the Holocene in the geological literature and is characterised by stability of key natural systems which enabled the rise of modern human societies. The Holocene epoch encompasses the entirety of written history. But it goes on to state, this stability has now ended. Human activity has altered the functioning of key natural systems that regulate the Earth's life support systems. This chart from a report by Stefan et al. In 2015 shows what they refer to as the 9 planetary boundaries. Anything in the yellow zone has reached a point of increasing risk and uncertainty. 2 of the 9 have already reached the red zone, which is characterised as being at high risk and beyond any zone of uncertainty. Those 2 areas are biodiversity and biogeochemical flows. So what do the IPPR mean by this? Well, let's take biodiversity first. Here's what the report says. Human activity is directly killing an increasing number of plants and animals and accelerating the extinction rate of species. Rates have increased to between 100 and 1,000 times the background rate of extinction under normal conditions. These rates are unseen since the extinction of the dinosaurs. The Earth is undergoing the 6th mass extinction in its history. Up to 58,000 species are believed to be lost each year, and vertebrate populations declined by 60% between 1970 and 2014. Loss of vertebrate populations in some countries exceeds 85%, while freshwater vertebrate populations have declined by 83% across the world. More than 40% of insect species are declining and a third of species are endangered. At current rates, insects could potentially be extinct within a century. Overall, it's estimated that population declines since the emergence of human civilization constitute 83% of wild mammals, 80% of marine mammals, 50% of plants and 15% of fish. Doesn't sound particularly encouraging, does it? So what about biogeochemical flows? Well, here's their commentary on that. It's estimated that human activity has caused more change in the nitrogen cycle over the last 100 years than in the preceding 2.5 billion years. Agricultural inefficiencies mean that high levels of phosphorus and nitrogen run off into rivers, lakes and seas, leading to over-enrichment of the water with minerals and nutrients. This induces excessive growth of plants and algae, resulting in oxygen depletion and dead zones. It's estimated that marine dead zones span 245,000 square kilometres of oceans globally, an area the same size as the UK. So the IPPR have chosen the United Kingdom as a case study for their environmental research programme, and specifically they draw on the findings of an extensive project undertaken at the University of Leeds in the UK called A Good Life for All Within Planetary Boundaries. The project analysed 7 biophysical indicators in comparison to their respective boundaries. Here's the chart showing their findings. So to stay within the planetary boundaries, we Brits need to limit our CO2 output per person to about 1.6 tonnes per year. We currently produce 12.1 tonnes of CO2 each, so that's 756% of the boundary limit. Good start. Phosphorus and nitrogen are both similarly massively over budget. Thankfully, we're fairly frugal with our water use, and something called embodied human appropriation of net primary production, which is a measure of land use intensity in tonnes per year per person, resulting from our biomass consumption. But our ecological footprint, which is defined as how much biologically productive land and sea area we need to produce the resources we consume and to absorb the CO2 emissions we generate, is well over twice the boundary levels, and our material footprint, which is basically all the raw material consumption, is over 3 times the boundary limit. And by the way, we're by no means the worst case scenario. So the IPPR concludes that we have indeed entered what they call the age of environmental breakdown, which they consider under 3 headings. Number 1, localised impacts. The IPPR maintain that environmental breakdown will have, and is already having, direct impacts on societies and economies through, for example, extreme weather events, driving impacts such as disruption of infrastructure and ill health, with significant social and economic costs. Number 2, systemic consequences. They say the consequences of breakdown are systemic and uncontained by the boundaries of the nation state. Globalised economic systems transmit the impacts of local events across national borders. Food shocks, for example, often as a result of extreme weather events, don't just affect those countries in which the agricultural system is impacted, but are experienced across supply chains through shortages and increased prices. Number 3, interaction with socio-economic context, by which the IPPR mean that the consequences of environmental breakdown will interact with existing social and economic trends such as inequality, compounding and exacerbating them. In the extreme, environmental breakdown could trigger catastrophic breakdown of human systems, driving a rapid process of runaway collapse in which economic, social and political shocks cascade through the globally linked system. Lots of potentially catastrophic challenges, but do the IPPR have any bright ideas to solve any of them? The report suggests we need 2 transformations to the structure of socio-economic systems in response to environmental breakdown. Firstly, a socio-economic transformation to achieve a safe and just space for human activity, bringing it within environmentally sustainable limits while tackling inequalities and providing a high quality of life to all. And then preparing ourselves with an increased level of resilience to the impacts of environmental breakdown, covering all areas of society, including infrastructure, markets, political processes, social cohesion and global cooperation. And how does the IPPR suggest we achieve these lofty goals? Well, they conclude with this statement: this is an unprecedented challenge. In rising to it, we need a new sense of agency, one that can overcome major barriers to progress, including the constraints of our governing systems, the power of vested interests, and the complexities of creating political coalitions across populations who have vastly different experiences of breakdown. In particular, younger generations will need help in finding the energy and a sense of control that often eludes them as they begin to realise the enormity of inheriting a rapidly destabilising world. And they end the report with a quote from the American novelist James Baldwin. Back in 1962, he said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." That's it for this week. If you enjoyed the video and found it useful and informative, then please do give it a like and share the link with your friends. With your support over the last few months, the channel's been growing steadily and we're getting near to the 5,000 subscriber mark now. And that'd be a nice landmark to hit on our 1st year anniversary, which is coming up at the end of March. So if you haven't already subscribed, it'd be great if you felt you could support us in that way. It's absolutely free to do that. And if you hit the little bell icon as well, then you get notified when all the new programs come out. It's dead easy to do, you just hit this link here. As always, thanks very much for watching, have a great week, and remember to just have a think. See you next week.